Insulin is a hormone, and it drives sugar from your bloodstream into your cells where it's needed to burn as fuel. What would happen if you couldn't drive your sugar into your cells and the blood sugar levels went up? What would we call that? Yeah, that's what diabetes mellitus is a condition. It's not an insulin deficiency. Type 2 diabetics actually make more, not less insulin. It just doesn't work. It doesn't work because there's something called insulin resistance. There's resistance at the cells to accepting and utilizing the insulin. What causes insulin resistance? Well, it's not just fat, but more specifically, the diet that makes you fat. Now, why do I say that? Well, if you're overweight and have insulin resistance, do you have to lose all the fat to start improving your insulin resistance? No, the day you change your diet, you start to see objective improvement in insulin resistance. As soon as you stop doing the things that cause it. Now, it's true, you will lose weight, and over time, you'll lose weight all the way down to your optimum weight, and you will get improved insulin function. And that's why type 2 diabetics that do diet and exercise oftentimes can improve their condition, sometimes dramatically. And with fasting, that process happens even more quickly. So you have a tunnel through your body. That tunnel starts in your mouth, and it goes down the esophagus. Yep. And then it gets to the stomach, and then it goes through the small intestine, and it goes through the large intestine, and then eventually ends up down in the rectum, and then there's a hole at the end called the anus. And so digestion is essentially shoving things in one hole, and then later trying to push it out the other. But nothing has been in the body unless it gets absorbed through your intestinal mucosa, represented here like a screen. Now you notice the holes. If the holes are smaller than the fly can't get through, can it? And the same thing's true in your body. When you swallow something, it does not enter your body unless it gets through the intestinal mucosa. And that mucosa is so small that, for example, even a protein molecule is too big to get through it. An amino acid can get through, a protein can't. And so that membrane filters things, so you're only absorbing the stuff that you need. But what happens in the intestinal mucosa is the same thing that would happen with your screen. What if the screen becomes damaged? Can the flies get through? Yeah, and in your intestinal tract, if you have inflammation that causes damage, stuff can leak through. They call it gut leakage. So what might cause gut leakage? What could cause inflammation? What could you do to cause inflammation in your system? So any source of free radicals, like what's the best source of free radicals? Free radicals are reactive, O3, reactive oxygen molecules that can damage tissues. How about smoking? Do you think smoking causes free radicals? Could you tell which is the smoker? How could you tell? So wrinkles are cross-linked collagen tissues that come from free radicals. It's a facilitated part of aging. Smoking literally just speeds up the aging process, so you get that really highly attractive wrinkled look, which is, I assume, why people smoke, because they're looking for that. Now, do you think smoking just affects their face? No, it affects all the tissues in the body, including the animal lining of the blood vessels, which is why only 20% of smokers will get lung cancer. Because they get that damage to their blood vessels and they get that heart attack, 80% will never get lung cancer. In fact, you could almost say that smoking is protecting them against lung cancer by killing them from heart disease. Yeah. But what if you didn't want to smoke because it's so disgusting? What else could you do to bathe your body in free radicals? Drink alcohol, absolutely, including red wine, including organic red wine, okay? Because alcohol, the peroxidation of alcohol yields tons of free radicals. For example, why do you think alcoholics get cirrhosis of the liver? The cirrhosis of the liver, that fatty lymph infiltrate, is a scar tissue that results from the liver having to detoxify the nasty effects of alcohol. So but what if you didn't want to smoke and drink? How about eating oils, particularly heated oils, and foods cooked with oils like breads and crackers and cookies and basically all the stuff that you find in the grocery store packaged up in various forms? Excellent source of free radicals. Another thing fasting does is it reboots the autonomic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system is the part of the nervous system that controls the things you don't think about. For example, if you were to go out running and your heart didn't speed up, you wouldn't get enough blood flow and you'd die. Did you ever die because you forgot to tell your heart to speed up? Do you always remember to do that? How does it know to do that? It's the autonomic or automatic nervous system that controls that. And the autonomic nervous system has two parts, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic, and they work in contrast with each other to keep each other balanced. So, for example, if your sympathetic nervous system tone is too high, you might have a problem like constipation, because the autonomic nervous system controls peristalsis. Or if the parasympathetic tone becomes too high, you might have diarrhea. So balancing out the autonomic nervous system turns out to be an important issue. In fact, we've discovered literally hundreds of different systems that work on the autonomic nervous system. Have you ever wondered, how does massage, biofeedback, meditation, yoga, acupuncture, homeopathy, herbal therapies, chiropractic manipulation, osteopathic manipulation, how do all these things actually make people feel better? In large part, it's because of the effect on the autonomic nervous system. But the most powerful method I've ever seen to normalize the autonomic nervous system, it works like if you have a corrupted hard drive and things aren't working and you reboot the hard drive, you know how, you don't know why, but it kind of clears everything up and starts working again. That's essentially what happens in fasting. It's like rebooting the internal mechanisms of the body and rebalances the autonomic nervous system. Isn't it interesting? You know, you've got all these religions in the world, right? The Jews, the Jains, the Hindus, the Muslims, the Christians, all these different, they're killing each other in the street. They argue about so many different things. But they do have one thing in common, and that's a respect and recommendation of fasting. So every major religion has this tradition about fasting. They talk about it for spiritual reasons. They talk about it for health reasons. And there's probably a reason for that, because when people fast, it changes the way they think about themselves and the world around them. The immune system, and particularly autophagy, the body's ability to go in there and eat up broken down or damaged cells or cancer cells, is not suppressed but rather enhanced during fasting. And we know this because you can measure all kinds of indicators of immune system function, helper, killer T cell activity, neutrophil phagocytosis, et cetera. These all tend to be enhanced during fasting, including lysosomal activity, which is how intracellular debris is cleaned up. I would suggest that we know the cure of cancer, and the cure of cancer is prevention. So the real secret's going to turn out to be preventing cancer before it forms. And the way the body prevents cancer that it's being exposed to probably every day is through this immune system function and autophagy, and it is enhanced during fasting. And taste and adaptation. The idea that, you know, one of the biggest challenges in getting people to eat a whole plant food, SOS-free diet is people are addicts, and they're addicted to the artificial stimulation of dopamine in their brain, which we call the pleasure trap, from taking chemicals added to their food, including salt, oil, and sugar. So to get people to tolerate food, like my union member, who thought it was disgusting, tasteless swill, fasting is a really useful tool, because after fasting, good foods taste good. You can do the same thing with diet over enough period of time, but it takes about a month to adapt for the average person to a low-salt diet, and it can take as long as 3 months to get satiation on a low-fat diet. So you have to have some patience. And so people that say, well, I tried that diet for several days, but it didn't resolve my lifelong problems, isn't necessarily a valid criticism. We actually completed a study on taste adaptation. What we did is we figured out how to quantify minimum perception to things like salt and sugar. And so we tested people before, during, and then after fasting. And we did this both with objective measures and in the laboratory, but also, you know, hedonic measures of surveys. And what we found was that there is increased sensitivity to salt and a decreased liking of salty, fatty, and sweet fatty foods as a result of fasting, which may be why many of our patients that had trouble complying with the diet before fasting now find that they can get satisfaction from the diet and no longer feel like that it's tasteless swill. This is just a summary chart of things that we know increase in fasting and decrease in fasting. We know that glucose and insulin decrease, as IGF-1, which is insulin growth factor 1, associated with aging, also decreases. leptin, blood pressure, heart rate, mTOR, as well as the microbial load. Inflammatory markers go down in fasting. And essentially all of the abnormalities associated with metabolic syndrome. And we know that some things like satiety mechanisms and beta-hydroxybutyric acid, which increases BDNF. BDNF is brain-derived neurotrophic factor. This is the thing that's thought to protect the nervous system. Insulin sensitivity increases. Cellular stress, resistance, and adaptation. That was an interesting study Walter Longo did where he took rats that had cancer in matched groups. And the 30 rats that had cancer, if you give them enough chemotherapy to get rid of all their cancer cells, all the rats die. So why do they have to get rid of all the cancer cells? Why can't they just get rid of most of them? Because it comes back, grows back. If you give enough chemotherapy to get rid of all the cells, the host dies, which kind of defeats the purpose. On the other hand, he took the same rats with the same kind of cancer and used fasting before, during, and after that exposure to chemotherapy, and all 30 rats survive and had dramatic increased survival. Because fasting, it turns out, protects the healthy cells and it makes the cancer cells more vulnerable. Cancer cells don't have as much mitochondria, the energy-producing mechanisms. They have a higher metabolic rate. So in an environment without glucose, they have a selective disadvantage, which makes them much more vulnerable to traditional chemotherapeutic interventions. And so that's now being used in increasing ways with humans. And again, we mentioned gut diversity. You have about 1,000 strain of bacteria in the healthy gut of a human being, and fasting helps reboot that. What's interesting to note is that many of the markers that improve with fasting are the same markers that improve with exercise. Brain-derived neurotrophic factor goes up with fasting, with exercise. So do many IGF marker reduction, both fasting and exercise. Now, why would fasting, where you're resting, do the same kind of thing to the body as exercise, where you're vigorously mobile? That's not intuitively obvious, is it? Unless you realize that what does fasting and exercise have in common is they're both undoing the consequences of dietary excess. Fasting and exercise are undoing the consequences of dietary excess. And I'm going to suggest that for most of these diseases, particularly metabolic syndrome and all the related conditions, it's dietary excess that's the driving force behind that. And anything you do that reduces dietary excess is likely to be helpful. And the reason fasting seems to be the most helpful is because it's the most effective at dealing with the consequences of dietary excess.